Hi guys. So yesterday I was just watching a few things like on YouTube and stuff about autism, different people and different stories and different cures and such that people have had success with. And everyone has very different stories, of course. Um, and two things I realized as I was watching these things. One is that you have to chew up the meat and spit out the bones. You have to really be careful what you choose to focus upon because some of the statistics seem really bleak, but your child is not a statistic. They're a child of God and a child of promise. Um, like one statistic said, only 1 out of 5 adults with autism can hold down like a full-time job. And I'm thinking, wow, that's discouraging. But am I going to settle for that for my child? Am I going to believe that for my child? No. My child is a child of promise. Your child is a child of promise. And there are other statistics as well that I read in various articles as well that I was reading, and pretty bleak. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to believe this because this is what it says. It's sort of like someone who's been given a death sentence by a doctor. Doctors aren't God, so they don't know. They just guess, and they have their purpose, and I thank God for doctors, but they aren't God. And they'll say to a cancer patient, you only have 2 months to live. But do they really know that? God has a final say, right? He has appointed our days. And so that person could live a year or two, or they could be healed by God and continue to live, or they could die sooner than 2 months. Um, that's in God's hands. My times are in his hands, as I believe it's King David who said that in Psalms. So anyway, so you really have to, when you're researching and stuff, you really have to chew up the meat, spit out the bones, and focus upon the positive and trust God that, God's going to work out his plans for your child. And so your child is not just some statistic or anything. He or she doesn't have to fall in that, 1 out of 5 or whatever, right? And of course, you have the Lord, so that gives you so much more, promise for you and your child. And also, you building your child up and believing the best for your child is going to make a world of difference as well. So the second thing I realized is that there's always someone who has it harder. Um, but the Lord, he doesn't give us more than we can handle. And I know for me, some of the more extreme cases of autism, I wouldn't be able to handle. And I know it. I struggle just to have patience with my son, who is actually in many ways so mild. He's sociable and he's sweet. Like, not that they're not all sweet, but you know what I'm saying. When somebody is severe, sometimes they have severe sensory issues and such, and they can be very violent sometimes too. And it's hard to see that sweetness sometimes unless you really look hard if they can't communicate, you know. Although the parents will see it because it's their child, of course. But with my son, it's very evident. Because he's not as severe. And I just see some of the struggles, other parents go through with their children. And I think, oh my goodness, I don't think I could do that. Because, but it made me look back on how, my son used to be taking him out in public. It used to be worse. It used to be so hard. I looked at a picture of him, like of us, visiting my grandmother, who's now, passed away. Um, when he was about 2. We went to visit her in a home, and I saw the pictures, and he didn't want to sit still. He didn't want to stay in the stroller. He was cranky and crying, and just, it was hard. It was very hard. And he was like that often when we'd go anywhere. So I dreaded taking him places. That was, in fact, a very bad day. We had to go to my cousin's, and she had a lot of breakables, and it was just hard, because he was trying to go up her stairs, and he was just into everything. And I had to watch him. I couldn't relax. And it's gotten so much better, obviously, as he's gotten older. And other things have improved, his sensory issues, and he's also less fussy with his eating. Not as, he used to eat everything at a certain age, and then he stopped. He hasn't gotten to that point yet where he'll eat anything again, but he's eating more and more things. So that is an improvement. But there are people who have it much worse. But the thing, like, we all can relate and have certain things in common that we totally understand. Like, to have any child with special needs, there are things you're going to have in common with other parents, because your child has special needs and they don't fit the neat little box. You're raising a circle in a square world, right? So we are going to have things in common. definitely, regardless of how severe or how mild our child is. Obviously, someone who has a child that's very mild, that could almost pass as not having autism, you know, speaks well and all those things, it's not going to be as challenging on them as it would be someone with completely like severe, can't speak, you know, violent, etc. I'm not, you know, taking away from the person who has this child with, say, Asperger's or whatever, that, you know, they still have their challenges, you know, they still have their challenges. But I'm sorry, it's not going to be as hard as someone with, you know, a child that's more severe. And it's not. But it's still going to be hard to that person at times. Just to raise a child that's unique, like, well, all children are unique, but, you know, really different in their way of learning and such is a challenge, especially if you have them in, say, the public school system, which I don't, so that has made things easier on me. I think it would be harder if I had to put them in public school. But God does know what we can handle. So anyway, I just want to share that. So if you're out, you know, doing your research, because most of us do, we're always on the internet, kind of, you know, looking into things, choose to focus upon the positives and don't let those negatives put a dread in your head, because Satan is just using that, waiting to use that opportunity to put those ideas in your head, like your child's going to end up like this when they're an adult, or they're never going to be able to do this. Don't settle for that. Your child is a child of God. They are a child of promise, okay? And God has a plan, a unique plan for their lives, and that is just how it is. So choose not to dwell on those things, and that's what I do. I'm not going to accept those bleak statistics. My son has a bright future ahead of him because of the Lord, because the Lord has ordained for him to be here today. And yeah, so there are good things in store for him. And I'm not saying there's not going to be challenges. There are challenges, and there will be challenges. But he will shine. He will be exactly what God wants him to be. And that's enough for me to keep me, you know, having peace. And don't look too far into the future. You know, like Jesus said, sufficient for the day is the trouble there is in it. Like, don't think about tomorrow. There's already enough to worry about today. Like, don't overwhelm yourself, one day at a time, right? So don't look too far ahead into those things of the future. Just focus on today and helping your child today, and yes, look back to see the progress, because that's encouraging. But anyway, I just want to share that. God bless.